I'm glad, yeah, go ahead, clap. I'm glad that's a joke. I'm glad that we actually communicate way better than that. Like, I'm glad we don't know who's preaching by one email throughout the week. Like you said, my name's Josh. My wife was just up here, Alicia. I'm her husband. I'm a dad also. Got Dylan, Ava, and Zion are my 3 kids. Love being a dad and a husband. This week, it's kind of been fruit of that. My daughter went out and got 2 jobs this week. Go, Ava. So, yeah. Man, this is going to be a quiet crowd. Anyway, I'm super proud of her. Mark Smith kind of got on to me about that. He said, man, you made your daughter get 2 jobs. I was like, bro, gas. Like, you need 2 jobs right now. Like, even high school kids need 2 jobs. But not really. I didn't say that. I'm super proud of her, though. What's cool about being a dad and what I get to do, my youngest son, he actually came up to me in the lobby before I got in here just now, back here in the back. He said, hey, Dad, I'm going to pray for you real quick. I was like, all right, man, I appreciate it. So as I walked up to him, he just kind of hugged me. He said, God, just be with my dad. Just let him say what you want him to say. And then I was about to cry. I was like, man, there's so much. But it's so cool, like, to be a dad, to raise your kids in this kind of environment where they get to see Jesus and know Jesus. And it makes me really, really proud to be his dad. Obviously, Pastor Alex and Sam are not here today. They're with Josiah and Abby. They got married today. Give them another shout out. That's really big. It's going to be super big for our church. Abby's going to come here, and she's actually going to get Josiah in line. She's going to help him organize his life. Yeah, we got to name him back there. That is 100% true. So that's going to be good for him. I want to say just a quick shout out to our pastors, Alex and Sam. I want to tell you I love you. I'm thankful for you. You mean a lot to me, my family, and our church. And I want you to know, even though you're not here today, that we love you and we're thinking of you and have a safe trip home. Today, we're not going to stay in the series P23. I'm going to stay in Psalms, though, and keep us there, but we're going to move on to something else just for today. Pastor, when he gets back, we'll continue that series. We're going to be in Psalm 78, 1 through 8. I'm going to read it real quick. And it says this. It'll be on your screen. If you have your Bible with you, you can turn there. And it says this, O my people, listen to my instructions. Open your ears to what I am saying, for I will speak to you in a parable. I will teach you hidden lessons from our past, stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born. And they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. Then they will not be like their ancestors, stubborn, rebellious, and unfaithful, refusing to give their hearts to God. So we'll get back to this chapter in just a second. I titled this message, Don't Click on Me. I don't know if you saw this a while back, but it was like the weekend after Easter. We had like a little production mishap where there's something back here on this computer. It says, Don't click on me. But if you do, it shows up on this screen and it's not supposed to. And that happened. And when I saw it, it just kind of hung in my head for a few weeks. Don't click on me. Don't click on me. And I just got to thinking about this message, about what the things I was going to talk about. And it reminded me of the game Duck, Duck, Goose. Y'all remember that? Everybody remember Duck, Duck, Goose playing as a kid? So you're in a circle. You're sitting in a circle. And there's a kid walking around. He's like, duck, 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 duck. There's a lot of anxiety as a kid, knowing you're going to get picked, and you don't want to get picked. Like, please do not pick me. I cannot catch you. You're going to get back to my seat, and I'm going to be walking around saying duck, duck, goose again. So I feel that way about Christianity at times. I feel like we like being in the circle. Like, we like being with God. We like his love, his forgiveness, his mercy. We love all the benefits that come with being in the circle, having a family. We're always wanting somebody else to do the running. We're like, don't pick me. Like, pick anybody else but me. Like, pick the guy over here. I don't really want to do this. I really feel like you're about to pick me, but don't. Just pick somebody else. And thinking about that game and how simple it is, and I feel like we get to that point and we get to that place because, like, early in church, in my church experience anyway, probably like 20, 30 years ago, the goal was evangelism in church. Like, that was like the goal. And it was pushed so hard. I mean, it was like, get them saved, get them baptized, get them on a roll. And there's just all these little things we had to follow. And after that, you were done. You were good. You're in the Lamb's Book of Life. That's it. Like, you don't have to do anything else. And I felt like there was like this immense pressure to just get saved, and that was the end goal. Salvation is not the end goal. Salvation is the start. We call it a Fresh Start Sunday for a reason. It's a start of your journey with God. It's a start where it's a little bit less about you. It's more about others. It's your start where you get to love your neighbor and learn to love other people around you. But you really can't love your neighbor unless you learn how to listen to your neighbor. You can't really love your neighbor. I always talk about this. Usually when I preach, I talk about our neighbor. It's important to me because it's just a huge part of my story. And I want us to know, because I see us as people all the time, how we engage with other people and how negative it is, how we still have a lot of work to do. So it's always something I'm really passionate about. So when you become a Christian, when you get saved, however you want to word that, it's all about loving your neighbor. Now, it's hard to do that when you don't listen to them. So God's asking you to. He's picking you to be the one that listens and to have reason. And maybe you want to be done with that. Maybe you're like, you know what? I don't want to be a part of the don't click on me Christianity culture anymore. Here's the first thing you got to do. It'd be on your screen. Love to listen. You got to learn to love to listen. Now, I was watching a Joe Rogan podcast the other day, and for a very specific reason. I do watch his podcast quite a bit. They're just interesting. I like the subject matter usually, and I just like to hear people have interesting talks, organic conversations. I don't enjoy some of the language and the fact they smoke weed the entire time they're talking. But I do enjoy like the conversations they talk about. So anyway, I'm watching Joe Rogan, and they have a guy on here named Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson is known. He's a famous psychologist, a known atheist for a long time. And he actually went from an atheist. He believes there is a God. He does believe the Bible is true. I don't know how much if there's anything past that, but I do know he believes those two things. So he went from being an atheist to that. He's a super intelligent guy, and he was talking about the Bible, and he said this: the Bible is the very, very first book printed on the printing press. It was printed in Europe. So in our Western culture, it is the very first book that was printed. And he said this, and it kind of changed the way I even looked at the Bible. He said, the Bible is not a book. It is a library of books. So it's not just this one book. It's this huge, vast library of books, a collection of stories. And he said this about the Bible, and I thought this was really interesting. I didn't understand anything he said in the moment, but it was really odd and profound, so I looked it up. He said this. He said, it isn't that the Bible is true. It is that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, adding that the only way we can solve the problem of perception. Now, I know that was a wordful. I didn't understand anything he said. I just wanted to know what it meant. So I did some research, I did some looking, and basically he's saying the Bible is how everything in Western culture was started. You had the Bible, and our government, our moral code, the way we talk and communicate with each other, the way we do everything was from the Bible. The way, like, we derived all our truth that we know now from the Bible. That's a slippery slope too, because now you're starting to see that we don't agree with each other about everything, right? It's harder for us to communicate because we don't always have the same basis anymore. The Bible isn't the basis for everyone. We have a lot of individualistic type views, preferences, and our perception is changing. And so a lot of us we kind of yell at each other. We don't listen to the other side anymore, but because we have zero foundation. And as Christians, we should have a foundation, because we're going to talk to people that we don't always agree with, but as long as we have a foundation of where we're coming from, we can actually communicate with other people. Now, the Bible is very clear how we communicate. James 1:19 says this: understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. It's why I said you have to love to listen, because whatever you love to do is what you're gonna do. If you love to speak, you're gonna speak. If you love to talk over people, you're gonna talk over people. If you love to yell, you're gonna yell. But if you love to listen, you're actually gonna be able to sit and listen. You have people in our lives wanting to tell us their stories, and yet we don't listen. Whether that be your friend, your colleague, a family member, even your spouse. Because I would bet a little bit of money judging from my own experience, how well do we know our spouses? I'm not talking about like game night where you play the same game, like you beat everybody because you know all the same, man. I'm talking about like, how well do you know your spouse? Like, because I would grant, because I know where I come from. Like, before my wife and I got married, like I had all kinds of stuff I wasn't gonna talk about. I wasn't gonna tell because I had to be perfect. I already knew I was out kicking my coverage. And I was like, I cannot have any blemishes anywhere on me, no dents on the car. I'm gonna wax this thing. I'm gonna shine it up. It's gonna be the most polished turd ever. Like, I've gotta have everything together. She can't see any imperfections in me. And so I held on to that as long as I could. Then we got married. It was like, well, we lived together. Here it is. So that's how that went. But how well do you know your spouse? Really? Have you ever sat with your spouse and listened to their story to the point it made you uncomfortable? Like, to learn, because there's so many things that we like haven't dealt with from like long ago that they affect our relationships now. But we don't talk about those. We can't because we don't feel like people will hear what we have to say. So I would encourage you, maybe sometime, and I'm just as guilty. I'm not saying that I'm not guilty of this. Just Tuesday, my wife came to me and she was like talking about something that she was struggling with, and it's something that she struggled with before, and so she's telling me, and I've listened to this before, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna fix it. I'm just gonna fix it. Here I go, because that's what men do, right? We're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix the problem. We're gonna fix our wives. That's what we always say. And so here I go. I'm like, I'm gonna fix it. Well, I didn't fix it. So then I got frustrated, and I got insecure, and I got mad at her. I started getting mad at her, and I was like, I don't even know what to say right now. And she was like, I didn't want you to say anything. I just wanted you to listen. And I was like, haha. Love to listen, Josh. Love to listen. Because when you know how to listen, I feel like you know how to understand others better. You treat people differently, right? You want to understand who they are. You want to cheer them on. You want people to feel loved and respected. And we don't do that because our view of people is so narrow. We stop at these things. We stop at their past, their present, whatever they're doing now that we don't agree with. If they got some kind of addiction, we stop at their race, obviously. We stop at where they're from. Mackenzie Huntington people, y'all can probably feel that one. We stop at all kinds of places. But we have these stopping points for people where we refuse to listen any further. We don't go any further with that person. We don't sit down with them. Now, I'm gonna tell you a story. It's a really important story, a story that I just experienced. And I'm actually gonna come down here on the floor with you just to tell you this story because I want you to understand. I don't want you to be distracted by anything. I don't want to be up here. I actually want you just to close your eyes for a minute. Just for a minute while I tell this story. Me and my wife were at a ball game. It's been a couple months ago. And it was a team from Memphis that had come in to play at one of the local teams here. And we all know when like the playoffs come and we have to play like a team from Memphis, it's a predominantly black school. We all know the things that get said, like leading up to that point. We all know those things are said. We hear those things. But I'm at the game and I'm sitting beside a guy, and man, he is just railing the whole game. He is saying things that I can't even believe come out of his mouth. So he nicknamed the point guard Shaniqua. That's what he called her. He didn't know her, but she was black, so he gave her that name. And then he also the shooting guard, he called her the same name. And anytime they would mess up, anytime they would foul, turn the ball over, make a mistake, he would yell it out. He said, way to go, Shaniqua. Way to go, Shaniqua. Way to go. There you go, Shaniqua. And then they had one girl who was a really tall post player. She came in the game, and he was like, man, it's a pretty big, tall jigaboo there. And so if you know what that is, that's like a slavery term from way back in the day. And I haven't heard that word in like 15 years. So then it gets like towards the end of the game, and he says, he's like, man, look at their hair. You know they got to buy that, right? They probably get it at Walmart. And I felt like I was on a different plane, and I felt like I was in a different time. It was 2022, and I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm hearing all this. And I want you to open your eyes now, because I want to tell you the other part of the story. Actually, her name is not Shaniqua. Her name is Shelby. And Shelby is a freshman point guard. She averages 19.7 points per game. She has a GPA of a 3.8. Her dad is Patrick. Her mom is Danielle. Her dad posts stuff all the time about her on like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and he hashtags stuff because he's trying to get her name out there because he just believes his daughter's a really, really good ball player. And so when I sit beside someone that's like that, and when I hear all those awful, it ain't like it was a 70-year-old man, it's a 20-something-year-old kid. When I hear that stuff, I realize we don't listen. Because if we knew someone else's story, if we knew someone like Shelby, we wouldn't say that about Shelby. If we knew someone, if we'd ever sat down at a table with someone else like Shelby, we wouldn't talk about Shelby that way. That stuff like sickens me, guys, to a whole new level. It breaks my heart in a million pieces. It's hard for me to handle. It's hard for me to control myself, even in those environments, even when I have to be an adult and I have to be a pastor and I can't do something stupid, like punch somebody in the throat. But it's really tough. But when you learn to listen, all these things, because what we'll do is we'll diminish everything, and we'll get on our rail of like, we'll blame social media, we'll blame the media, we'll blame whoever, we'll blame somebody, we'll diminish everybody else's feelings, and we will forget to do the one thing that we should do, and that's look right in here and go, there's a problem. There's a problem with us, there's a problem with our heart, and there's a problem with the posture of our heart. When those things, like, we like to feel like we're not there anymore, but we are. And it's because we don't listen to people. We refuse to listen to other cultures, other people not like us, because if we can look in the mirror, we have to ask ourselves this question. When's the last time I sat down with someone that's not like me and had a conversation? Like, when is it? When was the last time I did that? Have I ever done it? Most of the time you'd say no. Most time we haven't. Even with that, that's not the end of this mission. We have to learn to love, to listen. But we also, part 2, have to tell our story. And I know that's hard too. In Psalm 78, I'm going to go back in the middle of verse 2 real quick and go to verse 7. It says, I will teach you hidden lessons from our past, stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation in the glorious deeds of the Lord about his power and his mighty wonders. For he issued his laws to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born. And they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. In this psalm, Asaph is telling the people to share their stories. To talk about, he says hidden lessons. That's just life experiences that you have, the things you experience. To talk about the glorious deeds, all the miracles he's done. So for what? Why is he telling them that? One, so we won't forget. And let's go down to verses 11 through 16 really quick. And it says this, they did not keep God's covenant and refused to live by his instructions. They forgot what he had done, the great wonders he had shown them, the miracles he did for their ancestors on the plain of Zoan in the land of Egypt. For he divided the sea and led them through, making the waters stand up like walls. In the daytime, he led them by a cloud, and all night by a pillar of fire. He split open the rocks in the wilderness to give them water as from a gushing spring. He made streams pour from the rock, making the waters flow down like a river. Because on down in this chapter, they forgot what God did for them. They forgot about the stream out of the rock. They forgot where he split the sea wide open. You know what they did? They became calloused, selfish, and they pretended to do the things he wanted them to do to get what they wanted. That's what happened in this chapter. Now, all of us have a story. We've all experienced life. We all have bad things that have happened to us. We've had good things happen to us. We have things we've achieved, things we've done wrong. We have all these things in our story. And we must tell our stories so we don't forget our story. Like when we were talking about earlier about the Bible as the foundation, how it's kind of slipping away now because we don't talk about, we don't like have the same foundation to share. Why is that? Because we forgot our story. We forgot his power, his word, his direction in our life, the Holy Spirit. We forget all these different things, and we end up with nothing. We forgot what we get rescued from. See, we always want to remember like the good stuff. Like we'll tell people like, Jesus died for me, rose again, forgive me of my sins, this is why I'm here, blah, blah, blah. We forget, though, like who we were before. God has a sea of forgetfulness. We do not. And I believe that's intentional because we need to remember. I need to remember where I'm from. I need to remember who I was. It's important because if I don't remember who I was, I'll forget how to show any kind of grace or mercy to anyone else beside me. Like when you look through the lens of grace, when you see other people, you see why they do something. You don't just see what they do. Because a lot of times we just see what people do and we don't see why they do it. Now, when you lose your why, which is your story, you'll lose your discipline. I see people come to church all the time. Man, they come in here red hot, ready to go. Like, I'm ready to serve, ready to get involved, ready to do this, ready to do that. And in 3 months, they've already kind of forgot like what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's really easy to do that too. I've been that way myself. I've forgotten my why at times. But people come in, they're ready to go, and then they just kind of forget. And when you forget your why, you'll start doing things like you'll quit group, you'll quit serving, you'll quit attending, and eventually you kind of flounder off into nothing. Pastor talked about that with the fading factor last week. And what we do when we forget our why is we become selfish, calloused, and then we pretend. We come in here on Sunday, we pretend, and then we go home, and that's what we do. And that's what happens when you forget your why. You got to have a why, and your why is your whole entire story. There's another reason why we have to tell our story, though, and it's for this. It's for the sake of the next generation. Let's look back at verse 4 and verse 7. It says, we will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. And then in verse 7 it says, so each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. I don't want us to read these verses and think just like our next generation just means our kids. It's way bigger than that. It's all of us together because we said earlier, the Bible isn't just a book. It's a library of books, a collection of stories. And the only way the gospel can be passed down is through stories. That's what the Bible is when you read it. It's someone telling a story. Whether you're reading a psalm, whether you're reading a New Testament, it's someone telling you of their experience with God or in the New Testament of Jesus. So some of you, all you have is a story to remember someone you love. Maybe somebody's passed away. Somebody's not here anymore. You have a story. You have stories, that's how you remember them. Just like we have a story to remember our Father in heaven. That's how we remember him. We're physically not with him, but he is still with us. And we have all these stories to remind us who he is. I think about that this week with the shootings in the Texas school, that you have a wife who is shot and killed. 2 days later, her husband dies, has a heart attack. They have 4 kids. They have 0 parents. All they're gonna have is stories. They're gonna have stories that the people are gonna tell them, and they're gonna have experienced themselves of their parents, and that's all they're gonna have. And that's what we have. But they're still powerful. You're still not without. Now, remembering that, some of us have a story, and we just don't tell it. And I'm always curious as to why. Is it because we don't feel like our story's been resolved? Is that what we need? Do we need God to resolve the story so we can tell it from a good perspective, so we can tell it from a place of victory, so we can tell it from a place of I'm through it, I'm done with it? Are we ashamed to tell our story? Pastor said in the beginning of this series, the very first week, in Psalms, 75% of the Psalms are Psalms of lament. And that means a passionate expression of grief or sorrow. So most of the Psalms are about grief and sorrow. And I know we like to sing the songs of God's come through, he's rescued me, everything is good, everything is wonderful. But most Psalms are, God, I don't know where you are. And you can read it. Even David, he's like, I don't know where you're at. I don't feel you. I don't know that you're there. I'm just trusting you're there somewhere. Like, those are 75% of the Psalms. And most of the time when we're going through that valley, like when we're in the middle of it, we just sit still and we sit silent. And we don't say anything. You know, I wish somebody when I was a kid would have come to me and said, hey man, I know what it's like to deal with depression. I'm like, man, I'm not the only one. Or somebody would have come to me and said, hey man, I've been molested too. Awesome, I'm not the only kid. Because you feel like that, especially as a kid, like you're the only one. Most of us in this room deal with something right now that we feel like we're the only one. Nobody else that knows anything about. And we're not. But you're gonna feel that way unless someone else shares a story that lets you know you're not alone. And there's two things you need to know about this, about sharing your story. We have to stop looking for God to resolve our story. And we have to start letting God redeem us through our story. God is not always going to resolve your story. It doesn't work that way. God is not always going to solve the problem. You're not always going to see a solution. But God is always going to redeem you through the process. He is a redeeming God. That is what he does. It's really hard for us to understand that because we just see a problem, it's got to be solved, it's got to be fixed, and then we can give God the credit or ourselves. But sometimes we just got to trust God that at some point through this process, that things are going to get better and they're going to be okay with him, not with us. So the thing with the Bible is this, and with stories. Most people, the Bible is true, and I think everybody knows that. But most people will tell you the Bible isn't relevant. You'll hear that a lot, especially from someone that's not a believer, doesn't go to church. They'll just say, well, it's not relevant to my life. It's not relevant to where we're at anymore. It was a really, really long time ago. And that frustrates us as Christians because it's like, no, the Bible's true. God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it's a living thing. It's a living word. It's a living Bible. God breathed it into existence. But you know why people really struggle with believing the Bible is a relevant living book? Because there's no new stories. And there's no new stories because we don't tell our story. See, we can tell Matthew's story, Paul's story, Luke's story. We can quote scriptures in the Bible, but we can't relate any of it to us. We're too scared to be vulnerable with people and transparent and share what God's done in our life so people can really see what the Bible is. And that's why people look at it as a dead book because there's no new story. People are looking for you to tell them the story. Just like people in the Bible were looking for someone else to tell them the story. And they did. It's how the Bible even exists. It was people that were brave enough and willing enough to live these experiences out with God and with Jesus and write this stuff down and tell these stories, to pass it down to us. And because we're silent, that's how lies manifest themselves. Lies manifest themselves when the truth sits in silence, when it has nothing to say. And I think that's where we find ourselves today most of the time. If all of us in this room want to reach the world and we want the church, the Big C church, to be heard, the first thing we got to do is learn how to love how to listen. And I mean really listen to people. Like hear them out. Hear people that we don't understand and don't know and have nothing in common with. And two, we have to learn how to tell our story. Even if you can't tell it from a place of victory right now, even if you're in the middle of it, even if your life just sucks, learning how to speak those words out of your mouth to give someone else a little bit of hope that they know that even though you don't have a solution to your problem, they're not the only ones with that problem. There's so many people in here that are trapped in their own story, in their own problem, thinking no one else knows what they're going through. And there's all these people in this room sitting around them going through the same thing. Yet, nobody says anything. It's just quiet. And when it's quiet, in that moment, the lies start. Because there's no truth to be told. We think of truth as like, the truth is the truth. It's the hard truth, blah, blah, blah. The truth is God loves you. God is here. And when you're in that moment, when you're like, I can't take this anymore, he's like, I got you. I got you. It's okay. I got you. That's the God we serve. He's not some authoritarian just ready to punch you for doing the wrong thing. He's just here to hold you up and lift you up. And I promise you, if we had a community of people that could really just learn to tell who they are, so that's what your story is who you are. And really be honest and open and transparent and let things out. You would see something you've never seen before in humanity. You would actually see like what we were designed to do and how we could love each other in a way that's something we've never seen. So I'm gonna ask you guys to stand up. We're gonna have a moment of response. And for some of you in the room, it's time to tell your story. To know that God's there just to talk to somebody. For some of you in the room, it's time to tell your story to help someone else. For some of you, it's time to tell your story to find some freedom, like some real freedom. For some of you, you don't have a story with God yet. The most important story. You're still here instead of chapter 1, giving my life. Like chapter 1 is like giving my life to God, all of it. That's chapter 1. That's where you start. That's where salvation starts. It's not about anything else. It's just about giving your life to God. And some of you are there. I want you to raise your hand if you say, Josh, I need to be a better listener. Just raise your hand if you need to be a better listener. Anybody in the room needs to be a better listener. And raise your hand, your other hand, if it's time to tell your story in any capacity. If it's time to learn what your story is. You know what it is when you have both your hands up in the air? It's an act of surrender. When you can love to listen, when you can learn to tell your story, you can surrender everything to Jesus because you can follow him that way. When you're letting go of all this other crap that holds you back, you can really follow Jesus. You can follow and you can love people in a way you've never have before because you can listen and you can tell your story. I'm gonna pray for all of us in the room to have our hands up. God, give us the strength and the humility to learn, to love to listen to people, to listen to stories, to learn to love the people that surround us that have those stories, to understand people that we don't even know. Give us the humility to do that. And give us the strength and the peace and the comfort in our hearts to actually share our story with people. The story that you've given us, the story that you are writing, the story that you have put in our heart to tell other people. Give us that strength, Lord, to do that so that we don't have to be silent, that we can come confident in who we are and who you've made us and all the things that you've given us, being confident and bold in our story of the love that you have for us. In your name, amen. Now, for the person in this room that doesn't have a story yet, maybe you want to have a story. Maybe it's time that you started your story. We're gonna pray together with you this morning. Everybody in this church is gonna pray with you. And we're going to pray with you loudly, because that's just who we are, right? It's Overflow Church. We're a little loud. That's good. Because we want you to be confident in what you're doing right now and to know that you're not alone, to know that you have a group of people that are beside you and behind you and that support you. So, everybody with their eyes closed this morning, we're gonna pray together. Dear God, I love you. Thank you for sending your son to die on the cross for me. God, today, I give you everything. I give you all of it. My baggage, my hurt, my sins, everything is yours. And God, today, I start my story with you. Amen. I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hand if you prayed that prayer. I just want you to know if you need to talk to somebody after this is over with, come find me, come find somebody up here, out there, guest experience, find somebody to talk to. If today is your first day to start your story, find one of us to talk to and let us know that's you.
Man, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope you're enjoying our Psalm 23 series. I know I am. I'm enjoying writing it. I'm enjoying preaching it. I know our church is enjoying it. And if you want to continue keeping up with us after this, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our channel, or even check out last week's sermon. And if you want to give to the move of God that's happening here at Overflow Church, you can do so through our app or through our website. We'll see you next week.